What's up guys, welcome back to the shop. In today's video we're going to be making a knife out of screws. Here I have a whole bunch of old rusty screws that have been laying around for a while. And here I'm just going to pour in a little bit of muriatic acid, that way they are clean and ready for forge welding. And afterwards we're going to neutralize in some water with baking soda. And after I rinse it off with some water, I'm going to pour in some acetone, that way I can clean off all remaining residues. And with our materials prepared, it's time to get to our canister. I've already prepped the canister, so it's already been spray painted and welded up together. So it is ready for our contents to go inside. If you don't know, I spray all my cans with white spray paint and let it dry. That way the contents on the inside do not stick to the can, and it makes for a nice, quick, easy release. It's important to tap the canisters periodically as you're putting your powder in. That way the powder can sink all the way to the bottom and make sure you don't have any voids. And with our canister fully welded, it's time to go onto our forging. I always forge from top to bottom, that way I get a nice solid billet on the inside. Then I press on the sides. I always start with the top first. After I return it to a can shape, I go in with my angle dies and I press it evenly on all sides, that way we get a nice solid billet on the inside. So here I missed a step on the recording, and I actually did a part and didn't hit record after I had set up my camera and everything, but I've already taken off the lid, and that's why it has no lid on it. That is why the billet's already starting to pop out, and with the help of the press and a couple little squeezes I can fully slide it out. That's why it's important to always prep your can ahead of time and use white spray paint. That way you have nice clean releases like this. Now from here I'm just gonna slowly work my billet down and flatten it. I'm looking to get my billet down to probably about a quarter thickness. That way I can stack it for a semi. Fortunately, my forge weld was successful, and as you can see I have very little cracking on the sides. Normally when I do something like ball bearings, because they are chrome plated, they don't really want to stick and there's always a lot of cracking. But since this was screws and we prepped and cleaned everything properly, it forge welded together very nicely. Here I'm welding up my semi. I have a 1084 core and I'm going to start pressing it together. One thing that gave me troubles down the line, as you'll see in the future, my billet wasn't exactly perfectly flat. Well, my outside parts of my billet, the outside layers weren't perfectly flat whenever I did them, so it kind of made the core move around a little bit. That was my fault. I should have taken an extra step and actually taken it to the surface grinder and really flattened those pieces out. But a way that I learn is by making mistakes and then try not to repeat them, which I still repeat them regardless, but that's besides the point. Now I know for future reference to always make sure to get those pieces surface ground if necessary. Here are my 1/4 inch kiss blocks and I'm just working the billet down. I'm using my less aggressive dies and I'm forging in the tip with the press. Why am I forging it with the press instead of a hammer? One, because I have a press and I decided to use it, and two, and mainly two, because I've actually finally got the upgrades I needed for my press, and because of those upgrades it's not teetering side to side, so the best way to test that out was to use the press like that. When I'm pressing down on something thin, it would normally try to push one way or push another, and so I was very eager to test it out. So now the press is back up and running 100%, and hopefully we get some cool builds in the near future. I'm already working on one right now, and hopefully it comes out good. And if you guys see it soon, that means it came out good, and if you don't, that means it was crap. And I'll be making some dies in the near future for my press as well, now that I have that part fixed. That way I can do things like pressing in my tangs a lot easier than this. One thing a lot of people don't take into account, because they don't make YouTube videos, I guess. One of the things I'm looking forward to doing is tooling up as much as possible. That way I can make my videos faster. That way I can be more consistent with my videos. I want to make these cool builds, but at the same time I also want to, get videos out at a reasonable amount of time. And the only way to properly do that is to do things like pressing in tangs and pressing in this and that. That way I can save one, my shoulder and my arm, and two, save on time, because that takes a lot of time out of the build. And overall just tooling up and using more tools versus just trying to hand forge everything. So for all my hand forgers out there that are mad that I don't hand forge everything, please take into account that making a high quality looking knife out of some weird crap that I decided to make it out of, and getting it out and editing the video and doing all that crap all within a week, maybe a week and a half, is actually a pain and it's a lot of work. So bear with me. Part of the way into the forging, I decided to make this a full tang knife because of all the extra material I had. So here I'm just cutting off the end, and I'm gonna grind in the rest of my knife and the rest of my profile. Here I have my handy dandy push stick, and I'm just slowly profiling the knife up to roughly where I have it drawn. My lines are not definitive. I'm just gonna slowly work it in and then test it out with my hand, see if I like the feel for it. And most of this I'm just winging. I don't have a exact template I'm using for these things. Most of it I'm just, doing it off of a whim, because I make basically a knife a week. I mean, you can only make so many different styles of knives before you run out of ways to make a pointy, sharp piece of metal. So I like to play with it. This knife is more of just a big knife, a big chef's knife with a drop point in it. And this one I actually am keeping for myself so I can cut my watermelons, because I like to eat watermelon and I need a big old knife so I can have a nice clean cut. So that's what I'm going to use this guy for. And it's about 11.5 inches long, so perfect for slicing a watermelon. Here I'm taking it to the surface grinder. That way I can get a nice clean even grind on it, get all the scale and bumps out of it so that I can heat treat it soon. On a knife like this, I would like to be able to heat treat it in my oven, but because I am stupid, I bought a oven that is only for like small knives, because I read the outside dimensions as inside dimensions. And because I did that, most of my knives don't fit in my oven. So if an oven company wants to sponsor me or give me something for free, I would say yes in a heartbeat. And if not, well, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe. Specifically subscribe and view and watch my whole videos. That way I can make some money and I can stop doing this in the forge. Or don't. It's not like 90% of you guys watch and don't subscribe. I'm just saying, the analytics tell me. So now with my knife quenched, I'm gonna start cleaning it up on the 2x72. After a little while of cleaning it up on the 2x72, I gave up and decided to use the surface grinder with a finer belt. So here I'm using a 120 grit belt and I'm just cleaning it up. Alright, so I have it down to 120 grit. I used the surface grinder because I felt like doing it by hand was just going to take way too long. So it's pretty rough, but it's looking okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my center line for grinding in my bevels. But before I do that, I'm actually going to do a test edge to see where the actual center line is, because while it's good throughout the majority of the knife, I know that towards the tip it actually moves over to one side. So to be 100% sure, in case I do have to move it over, I can move it with my carbide peen hammer, and I can adjust it however I need before I do my grind. So I'm going to put it in the edge first, and then I'll move it around as needed. But so far so good. Alright, so I have my edge marked out with a marker, and as you can see, it's more to one side than the other, especially towards the end of the knife right here where I got my transition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it back to the surface grinder. I'm going to take more material off of this side to hopefully even it out. Right here towards the end, I have the edge that goes off to one side. I'm going to run it like that Hopefully there's no issues and we get a nice sharp edge on it. If not, I can always hit it a little bit towards the edge. We'll see once I get the majority of the steel off, if I need to move the edge to the side or not on the tip. But for everything else, I do need to take off some material off the side, so that's what I'm going to do, and hopefully we get it a lot closer than what it is right now. But the pattern's looking pretty cool. You could definitely see the screws in there. You see these little lines from the threads on the screws. Oh, you can really see that one real good. See that screw in there? That's dope. That's really cool. You see those screws in there? Going all kinds of directions. Overall, it's a pretty cool looking knife. Lots of movement. So I got a pretty aggressive warp as I was grinding it, so I'm using a carbide peen to straighten out the knife. If you don't have a carbide peen, I do have a link in the description to where you can order a carbide ball, and then you just buy yourself a hammer and you can just make it yourself. It's a lot cheaper, and I definitely recommend making it yourself. I made this guy for like 15 bucks versus buying it for like 85 online. So I definitely recommend that if you're interested. I have a link on Amazon where you can buy that carbide paintball. Alright, so I got this guy all marked up from the carbide pin and I straightened it out, which is pretty straight. Then I decided to hit it here so I can force this tip to turn that way. So now my tip is slightly out of line, which is what I need. Since my edge is on the edge right here, by pushing it and twisting it up, now I can have this be the center and take off all this extra material on the side, and I should have edge everywhere. Hopefully that works out. If not, I'm gonna have to grind this edge like this, which is the last thing I want to do. I don't want to do that. So hopefully this works out. So here I'm just gonna start grinding in the bevels on my knife, being careful not to overheat my knife in the process. And as you can tell by the wet knife, I make sure to always keep cooling it down in the water I have in the bucket underneath my 2x72. And here I have one of my bevels ground. And to save you the boredom, we're going straight to the hand sanding, which took me about 3 or 4 hours to do to get it up to 800 grit. For my handle of choice, I decided to use some black paper micarta with an orange liner. I really like to use the orange liner because I like the color orange and it pops out really nicely with that black contrast. So that was my choice, and even though it looks kind of dumb here that I'm using a black marker to mark on a black background, it's not that dumb. I can see it, you can see it, but I didn't have any other markers that I could use. I normally have some gray ones around, but I lose everything so I couldn't find them. So black it was. And here I'm using the portavan to make quick work of cutting this material up. It's important to be very careful when you're cutting up the liner on the portavan because this thing cuts through it like butter, and it's easy to, underestimate how much force you need to use because this thing goes through it so quick. So definitely pay attention to that. And here I'm just gonna drill in my pinholes. And here I'm going back to the portavan and I'm cleaning up my edges. Since this is gonna be a full tang knife, I have to prep the front of my handle before I glue it up. That way I don't damage my knife in the process of fitting up my handle. And now I'm going to start mixing up my resin. I'm using 5-minute epoxy to glue my knife up together, and I'm being extremely generous with it. I always like to make a lot, that way I don't run into problems of having to make some more. It is 5-minute epoxy, so it does dry pretty quickly, and because of all the holes in my knife, I always make sure to pour in enough resin to cover up all the holes. That's gonna really strengthen the bond on my handle, though I must admit it is a very messy process, which is exactly why I always wear gloves when I'm doing this. With the handle all nice and dry, I go to the portaband and cut the excess off of my pins. I like to use the portaband to do this instead of just grinding them flat, because whenever you grind it, you introduce a lot of heat, and that brass holds in that heat and it can weaken the bond of the epoxy that's holding the whole handle together. So here I'm just profiling with a worn 36 grit belt, making quick work of all the rough edges. And now moving to a 120 grit to polish those edges up and get all the scratch marks out. And now for the moment of truth, time to see what it looks like. If you guys like what you see, be sure to subscribe, and that way I can afford more bottles of water that I can put at the bottom of my etching pipe. That way the knife doesn't fall all the way to the bottom and then I can't reach it. Pretty cool idea, right? It took me about an hour to figure that out. And so now we move on to the coffee. And the reveal on this knife is sick. Look at all that material I ground off. And after sharpening, this knife is wicked sharp. It passes the paper test with flying colors. And here's a final look at the finished product. I really like the way the pattern turned out on this side. You can clearly see all the screws that are in there and the fine threads, as well as my logo. Press it in there, looks pretty nice. And it has a lot of movement, and I always like the look of the graininess of the steel powder. But on the other side, because my sides were uneven, I actually ground off a lot of this side's outer layer. But overall, it still looks pretty cool. And I like that look of the jet black core. So I'm pretty happy with it. Overall, looks pretty cool. And the orange liner pops really nicely. I'm very happy with that choice. I'm starting to think I need to order some orange G10 pins so I can start using that with my orange liners. That would look a lot better. Overall, I'm very happy with the end result, and it's a very, very cool knife. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and wait till the very end of the video, and I got a very special treat for you guys. So just hold on a few more seconds, and I got a treat for you guys. For the real OGs that watch the videos all the way through, comment down below and tell me what you see at the end of the video. And I'll go heart your comment and reply to it, even though I reply to basically every comment, but you'll know you're one of the ones that made it to the end, and that's what matters. Here is an adorable rabbit I saw in my backyard and recorded for your guys' viewing pleasure. Thank you very much for subscribing and for watching. I appreciate you guys, and I will catch you guys in the next one.